Hello traders, Corey Mitchell here. Going to look at the Euro USD session high-low strategy. This is a strategy designed around the concept that as the price approaches daily highs and lows in the Euro USD from the London session and the USD session, we typically get a pop through like what we see here. So here was the low earlier in one of the London sessions. We have a move up off of it, the price comes back toward it, and will typically break through, even if just temporarily, because there's lots of stop orders. So what happens is, as this is moving lower and starts to bounce higher, more people accumulate long positions, and this low point is a logical place to set a stop loss. Unfortunately, logical levels, once the price gets near them, tend to attract the price back to them. So all those stop losses get triggered, causes a spike below. All those people who had bought during here and placed a stop loss here end up losing, or hopefully some of them got out here. There's also people who look at the highs and lows and want to go, as the price drops through the daily low, they might want to go short. So there's a whole bunch of sell orders, whether it's from people who had bought or people who want to sell near these levels. So we tend to get pops through them. So once we understand that concept, we can look for various patterns, and there's quite a few that you can see near these levels. So in the Euro USD session high-low strategy, I talked about one which was we want to see a contraction near a high and low. And in this video, we're also going to look at some variations of that. So we have simply consolidations. Once the price starts aggressively moving toward the daily high or low, we can watch for consolidation, and that just gives us a potential entry point. So once we have 3 bars, this rectangle is a little bit big, then we can look at potentially entering a trade. I just use a 2-to-1 reward to risk. And so whatever our risk is, about 4 pips here, target at about 8 pips, and we would have got filled. Would have had to wait for a little bit of this consolidation, but eventually the price kept dropping. Same thing happens here. We have this move off the high for most of the London session, and then we have this aggressive rally back toward this high. And as that happens, you can guess that that's going to act like a magnet. A little bit longer term traders maybe have some stop losses above here, and it just blows right through it once it gets close to it. So this consolidation again provided a potential entry point once it broke out of it. 2-to-1 reward to risk. Oops. So that would have been about there. And we're not assuming that the price is going to continue running in this direction for any length of time. That's why we just use the 2-to-1, because quite often you'll see this type of move where it drops below and then it'll just snap back the other way. So those were 2 possible trades. I believe we had one later on in the session. So we had this low, price had rallied off of it for the rest of some of the London session into the US session. Then we had this big sell-off coming into it. So now this strategy doesn't always work, because you could have had some potential consolidations right here where you thought, ooh, it's going to break below and trigger it right then. And that happens a couple of times, but it doesn't do it right away. Instead, it drifts higher, but then we have another drop in momentum, or a drop with momentum, price consolidates. At this point, we're getting very close to that level, and this time it does fall through. So that's why we use the 2-to-1 also. We can afford to be wrong every once in a while, and we'll still be profitable overall if we use a 2-to-1 reward to risk, and we manage to keep our win rate fairly high. So there's a number of these patterns to look for. Nothing works all the time. We'll also see some different days where So for instance, on this day, the price just kept crashing through. So we don't really have any big moves off prior highs and lows. The price is just basically making continuous lows all day. And even here, we do have a bit of a move up off this one. But the price just, it doesn't consolidate anywhere close. It just crashes right through or consolidate above it. It just keeps going. So on days like this, we're not going to be able to use the strategy because the lows are just continually getting taken out, or if it's an uptrending day, the highs are just continually getting taken out. So these type of days aren't going to work well for the strategy. Other days we don't really get the consolidations, or they're not long enough. I typically like to see at least 3 bars, and on this day we had quite a few where we only had like maybe 1 or 2 bars where the price consolidated just a little bit. So we have this high. Price moves back toward it with some enthusiasm, but basically only 1 bar. We have an up move, kind of a sideways bar here, and then the price keeps running up. And so no real chance for us to get into that one. Same with here, very ragged coming into it. We have a consolidation up here that's a little bit farther away. This one doesn't really consolidate too much. We don't really have a sideways move much at all. Here, and then another example where maybe we could have looked at this. We have a nice little pattern here. Price is chopping around. It breaks out the bottom. It pops out the top. So again, these aren't all going to be winners. And then we just start incrementally taking out the lows. So there were a couple opportunities in here I wanted to talk about. So the price starts chopping around. We have a new low here. It's moving up off of it. And once we see this, we have a lower high here. This would be a fairly advanced trade because you got to start looking at the price action. This is possibly another strategy I use called a technical turnaround. So we've had a down wave and this up wave almost completely erases it. So we could look at this as, if it breaks out to the upside, as a possible reversal back up into this area up here. But instead it breaks to the downside. So this would have given us a potential shorting opportunity, whether you used it to hold it through the session low breakout would be an option, but this was a potential short entry here based on this strategy or another one. Then we also, another consolidation that we have is this little one right here. So price and unfortunately there as well, which would have triggered us in on that little bar and then stopped us out. But this one would have made us our money back 2-1. So yeah, just a few examples. Again, if you can keep even the win rate around 50% and you can make 2-1 on your trades, reward to risk, you're gonna do fairly well. So that's another couple examples. The bigger contractions that I was talking about in the EURUSD session high-low strategy is something like this, where we get a contraction. So this would have been a nice trade because we're starting to see by this point, by the time we get to here, we have a couple swings where we can really see this price starting to contract. And if it breaks out of this little consolidation, it's probably either breaking out of this triangle to the upside or this triangle to the downside. In this case, it breaks to the downside, triggering us in. We would have had a quick 2-1 reward to risk trade there. Pretty small stop loss, only like a couple pips. And fairly easy to get out even with a little bit more than a 2-1. So that one would have worked out. This one, no consolidation, but you can see even then, there's probably some sort of news that came out right then. Even then, just takes it out a little bit, and this is why We don't assume that the trend's going to reverse just because it made it above the high. We're not going to assume it's going to keep running. This one just popped above it, cleared all those stop loss orders, all those orders that people had out there, triggered them, and then went right back the other way. So that's a little bit more of a look, a few different examples of the session high-low strategy, how we can use it again. We're not going to win all of them, but even if we win around 50%, we're going to do pretty good with a 2-to-1 reward to risk. This is the contraction type setup. You can look for these near highs and lows. They won't occur as often as the consolidations. You're going to see consolidations inside these contractions, but if you're just looking for the consolidations as we pick up momentum into a higher low, we're going to see these quite often in this pattern. The contractions we're going to see less, simply because there's more price waves. You need to see the price oscillate back and forth near the high low, and yeah, that's just not going to occur as often as a small pattern like this. So you can look for both of them. Sometimes they set up, other days we're just not going to see this pattern because the price is just trending relentlessly, putting in new highs and lows. So on those days we won't be using this strategy. But when the price is moving a little bit more sideways, we'll often see these types of setups. So something to keep in mind as you are trading. So until next time, happy trading.